Hello, my name is Brandy Chase, and welcome to my presentation, Before and After the Potter's Wheel, a close look at lore surrounding ceramics' most iconic tool. This research was funded by the University of Utah Office of Undergraduate Research, and Dr. Meekyung MacMurdie mentored my investigation. The statement here by Bernard Leach, the father of British studio pottery, is a mere footnote in his celebrated Potter's Book. Its premise, that technology used by men had displaced women and their antiquated ways, was already so ingrained in ceramics lore that he didn't bother to cite a source for his claim. This is how the ceramics lore operates. It enlists the battle of the sexes to explain technological change. It assigns gender to techniques and technologies and valorizes or denigrates accordingly. For example, male equals progress, female equals regression. It elevates the wheel and kiln above every other available technique and tool, and it hides them under the umbrella hand building. It ignores the variety and persistence of these tools and methods. So this project seeks to identify the origins of the lore. It also looks for counter-narratives to explain how innovation occurs in ceramics and why ancient methods persist alongside technological advancements among potters of all genders. My research draws on 150 years of observations and speculations about ceramics, technology, and culture found in the writings of art historians, anthropologists, archaeologists, philosophers, and gender theorists. I also make comparisons between Mesopotamian and pre-Columbian ceramic production techniques because these are both believed to be the point of origin for two different trajectories in the development of ceramic technology for mass production. So in Mesopotamia, we have the masculinized wheel, and in pre-Columbian societies, we have a gender-indifferent mold-making techniques. The European and Asian cultures adopted the wheel technology from Mesopotamia, and it is in these societies that this particular ceramics lore particularly operates. It's also important to note that Mesopotamian societies also developed mold-making techniques, and that these were used in tandem with wheel techniques. You'll also notice that there's a QR code there in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide. This links to my annotated bibliographies and detailed notes for this project. So let's begin with the origin of the ceramics lore that I'm talking about here, and it's rooted in this idea of the matriarchy, and the matriarchy is a myth. So the matriarchal potter archetype entered the mainstream via evolutionary anthropologist ideology of the 19th century. According to their logic, matriarchy marks a universal and spiritual stage before patriarchy's ascent. Society's supposed evolution from male to female rule is the brainchild of Johann Jacob Bachofen. He is highlighted in red here. He is a Hegel-influenced gentleman scholar. His ideas inspired Louis H. Morgan's, he's an American anthropologist, Louis H. Morgan, and his widely read book, Ancient Society. That book influenced Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, whose writings influenced many people, including Bernard Leach. Bernard Leach himself had powerful sway among potters in the East and in the West. But here's the thing. There is no conclusive evidence in the archaeological record that women ever ruled, or that there was ever an era of women ruling. Another strand in this matriarchal myth is this idea of an ancient matriarchal pottery tradition. So this idea comes from ethnological anthropologists who use contemporary cultures that they deem primitive, where women are the predominant potters, as examples of stages in the march of technological progress. So this approach suffers from the denial of coevalness. It's an idea that comes from Johannes Fabian. His notions notes moments when we view other cultures as if they were living in another epoch, and we use their present to represent other people's futures, or people from the past's future. And when we do this, we can't help but impose our modern biases and also hierarchies on the past, and we distort the past when we do this. And again, there is no evidence of a purely matriarchal pottery tradition in the archaeological record. So today's researchers, largely interdisciplinary, they correlate pottery and maleness at certain levels of organizational production. For example, when there's specialization or where there are complex divisions of labor. But when even these systems are understood more broadly than just men forming pots on the wheel, then these organizational levels, they present the actual truth of production, that production is a multi-stage process, and that women actually mostly perform these tasks, these other essential tasks that are necessary to bring the work to fruition. So you can see from this slide, we have men forming pots on the wheel, and around them, in sort of a progression, first the materials need to be collected and prepared, and then decorated, fired, and marketed. But tellingly, one of the main activities is women trimming or extending the forms using hand building techniques and drawing from a myriad assortment of hand building techniques. So in truth, most pots are hybrid forms. And this is really important because this engendering of pottery techniques has led scholars to demarcate two stages of pottery development: by hand alone, by the wheel alone. But the archaeological record shows that hand methods have continued unabated and intermingled with wheel-thrown ones all along. Coiling, slabbing, molding, use of a turntable, all of these methods persist because each has its individual merits and relative advantages depending upon the maker's desired outcome. The strange prestige we've bestowed on the wheel and on wheel throwing has distorted the historicity of ceramic methods. All of these methods have histories, but you wouldn't know it. On the other hand, the wheel has a very storied history, very celebrated history. Pundits often affirm ancient Mesopotamia as the point of origin for the wheel, but there is no coherent description, vocabulary, or material evidence from that time about this artifact that exists. A lot of ethnographic anthropologists will use pot reading as a technique to determine whether or not the wheel was present, having today's potters look at vessels for evidence of spinning. But because even the simplest hand building techniques involve turning the clay in some fashion, the presence of a wheel to turn or to spin and leaving marks of spinning is not enough to indicate whether or not a true potter's wheel is present. A true potter's wheel incorporates a flywheel that when it's kicked, produces momentum and continuous rotation that frees both hands so that the potter can use both hands to exploit centrifugal force to form a pot out of soft clay. This wheel is the tool that researchers have in mind, but this is not the tool that has been used since ancient Sumer. The flywheel is a mechanical principle that probably didn't come into use until the 2nd century. It probably took a millennia to evolve out of these other methods. You see these other types of turning vessels. And even when it did emerge, it did not replace them. So the wheel is hailed as improving productivity, and it certainly does that, but it was not the only means of mass production. So the wheel was supposedly innovated from within pottery itself. and that this innovation changed pottery from a household craft to an industrial process. But potters, when they use pottery as a vocation, their economic survival, no matter what gender is making the pot, requires strict adherence to proven methods and materials. And so, as a class of, of people, they're actually quite conservative and they are not inclined to innovate. Change is not intrinsic. It has to it has to come from some exogenous source. And there was an exogenous change that inspired the desire to increase production, and that was increasing population. So the industrialization of ceramics was a function of a growing population, not innovation. So while the wheels, as we said, the wheel certainly increases productivity, but it does not provide the only means to do that. Ceramic molds are also a perfectly reasonable way to increase productivity. When the potters experienced growing population, their appetite for brisk sales incentivized the addition of new skills and production methods to meet a growing market. So, as we said, in Mesopotamia, it led to the wheel. In America, it led to molds. In the Americas, rather, it led to the molds. But here's the situation. As exciting as that sounds, in most scenarios around the world, pottery as a vocation, pottery making wares for markets is a very undesirable vocation. Those who do it, they feel fated to this work and they stay for lack of better options. Those who can leave, they do. So while population increases presented new opportunities for technology, it also presented opportunities for exit. And if women left pottery, they probably did it for greener pastures. So, in conclusion, the binary opposition that's embedded inside of ceramics lore, it hides the character of ceramicists as a class of people, like what motivates ceramicists. It hides the nature of production. It hides the range of available pottery techniques. It also hinders our apprehension that the options amongst these techniques represent choices made by individuals in the past to solve problems within the cultural and material constraints of their time. It hides history. The merit of a technique should reside solely in its suitability to achieve a desired outcome and nothing else. And so these other techniques, well, they just limit our ability to take advantage of all of our options in the present as makers. So, areas for further study. I am pretty sure that I agree with the idea that the potter's conservatism prevented male and female potters and in the Americas and in other places where the wheel was not adopted from picking it up because they already had methods that were working for them. But it doesn't really explain why the potter's wheel never presented itself in the Americas. And I have a theory that because the pre-Columbian cities did not reach the population densities that Mesopotamia did, that might partially explain why the wheel did not emerge there. I think it's worth further study. Secondly, I am very interested in learning about when the wheel disappeared from industrial ceramics because it's no longer used there, and what other techniques replaced it. For example, slip casting and pressure molding. I'm also interested in about the time period because I'd like to know if it coincides with the emergence of the studio pottery movement, of which Bernard Leach is the main champion. So thank you if you're still with me. Thanks so much for listening to my presentation. This QR code will take you to my annotated bibliographies and research notes for this study, and it will can probably continue to evolve because I am very interested in this subject.